Let's look at the Singapore Virtual Design and Construction, or in short we call it VDC framework. I'll be taking you through the introduction on VDC, and we will look at how VDC can be used to address some of the gaps in the processes in the construction of a project. We'll look at the key principles when we are applying VDC to a project. We will look at the Singapore VDC framework, which includes three areas. The first area is the use of technologies, which BIM is the one that forms the backbone of the technologies. And we will also look into the area of people. We call it the ecosystem, and the area of processes, and we want to optimize the various processes that the different stakeholders use in their day-to-day work in the project. So we call it the project optimization. And we'll look at the collaboration periods, and I'll show you some sample metrics and key performance indicators. So over the past almost 10 years, the Singapore's built environment sector has made quite good progress in adopting BIM, Building Information Modeling. More firms are embracing this technology and starting to reap the benefits, such as having better collaboration among the different project team members and avoiding abortive works through early identification of the crashes in the design. Some of the measured outcome of BIM implementation in projects includes a 30% reduction in abortive works and up to 80% reduction in variation or change orders. BCA introduced the Singapore VDC Guide. The version 1 was launched in October 2017. And the intention of this guide is to provide some help to the project stakeholders that want to use VDC, when they are commencing or use VDC for their projects. So let's take a look at this Singapore's VDC guide. The Singapore VDC guide is a reference document that provides a set of guidelines for the implementation of VDC in the Singapore context. The document aims to establish the following areas. Number one, to establish a common understanding on the definitions, components, and principles of VDC, or what you call virtual design and construction. Number two, to provide a framework to guide VDC implementation in building projects or for organizational improvement. And number three, to close some of the key gaps in our current project delivery practices to facilitate the industry transformation. Currently, there are still some inefficiencies in the way our project is delivered even when we are using BIM for our project. For example, in the design stage or the design phase, the BIM during the design is usually not developed beyond the regulatory submission, meaning that the BIM model typically is developed just for submission to the different authorities. While that is good, it can be further enhanced to make the whole delivery of the project more effective through this VDC. And what the VDC guide hopes to do is to allow the project stakeholders, through using VDC, to get BIM to be carried over beyond the submission stage to the authorities and then handed over effectively to the downstream stakeholders for them to use. Another problem that the industry reflected is that a lot of time and effort is spent clarifying and resolving the design intent discrepancy during the pre-construction stage. So again, through VDC, it is hoped that there could be an intensive collaboration period okay, to clear all the design intent prior to the actual physical construction. So typically when we say that we are using VDC, it will require us to actually build the project two times. So sometimes people will wonder, why are we building our condominium or our project two times instead of once? The reason is because the first time that we are building is in the virtual mode, okay, virtual mode. And the purpose of building in the virtual mode is that all our problems, okay, all our issues, it will be easier to rectify in the virtual mode. And once we have really rectified all the problems, all our issues in the virtual mode, by the time we go on to the actual physical construction the second time, in theory, there will be no more problems because we already addressed all the problems when we are building the first time in the virtual mode. That is the main thrust of this using VDC in any typical project. We want to build two times. The first time in the virtual mode so that we can iron out and resolve all our problems. And by the time we go on to build in the physical world, all the problems will have been resolved. Okay, another gap is that currently there are still a lot of projects where the stakeholders reported that the BIM is underutilized, especially during the construction stage. So through VDC, it is hoped that BIM is fully maximized in the construction stage and brought right to the field and beyond. So we can have the concept of what we call a digital twin of the actual physical building or this infrastructure or facility that we are constructing. Here are some key principles when we are applying the VDC. The thing to take note is that the BIM alone by itself is not the VDC. BIM is only a main component or one of the main components of VDC. In the specific context of VDC, BIM is the information that you need to perform specific activities in order to meet your goals and your objectives. Yeah. So the second principle is that reaping the full benefits of VDC across the value chain requires an industry process transformation. Yeah. So this includes transformation in the way we work, in the way we collaborate, the extent to which we share information and the quality of the information and the way we deliver our projects. The reason for saying that is that typically we do not build two times, okay, when we are doing our construction work. We only build one time, and the one time that we are building is that physical, building, okay. But when we are using VDC, okay, it is getting ourselves to build two times. The first time is to build the building in the virtual world, okay, or build in the virtual world, and then after that, the second time we build it in the physical world. So it is very different, you see. So that's why we call it the requirement for industry, process transformation. It will require us to work in a different way, yeah, so work in a different way, collaborate in a different way, okay, share information in a different way in order to allow us to build the first time virtually, okay, yeah. So the third principle is that the VDC is a framework. So waiting for the full industry transformation to take place is not necessary to start to see the benefits of our own implementation. Okay, VDC is a framework that may be applied in any scenario by any project team, any organization to meet the targeted goals to improve the performance. So under the Singapore VDC framework, VDC is the management of BIM models. BIM models is an example of the information which we embed, okay, through this BIM technology. There could be other technologies that is coming on board in the years to come, but typically it's a way to manage information, okay. Also management of BIM models, okay, and you do not only need to manage the BIM models, okay, but because you are getting the stakeholders to build two times, first time in the virtual world, then second time in the physical world, you need to then manage the people that is going to build the project two times and the processes that is going to be used to build the project two times in order to achieve explicit project or organizational goals and improve the performance. Okay. So the key thing to take away is to understand that when you are using the VDC framework, okay, you need to manage three key areas. The first area is in the area of information, where typically we are using BEAM, okay, as a backbone. All right. Beyond that, you also need to look at how the people come together to share information, to collaborate, okay, and the different processes of doing this. Okay. Right, so when we are using VDC, basically we are going to build twice. So people may think that building twice is a waste of resources compared to building one time. So that is not the correct way to think, because when you are building twice, the first time you are building actually is in the virtual world, and that actually give you a lot of opportunities for you to thrash out all the issues, resolve all the problems, rather than for the problems to surface in the physical world where it is more difficult to resolve. Okay, so that is the idea behind building twice. First time in the virtual world, second time in the physical world. Okay, so building twice enables the project team to fully simulate the design and construction in a virtual environment first before the execution on site. Okay, and that involves all these three areas which just now I was talking about. Okay, so in the design stage, okay, the model, okay, what is to be built, okay, we can actually go from here, from the design stage, go to here, okay, and then after that we can start to do our construction coordination, okay, in the virtual world, okay, or we rehearse what is to be built. And that allows us to have a very effective planning again in the virtual world. Okay, all right. Then after that, we build what has been modeled. Okay, through here, okay, we build what has been modeled and has been rehearsed. Because by the time we come to this particular stage where we are prepared to execute and build in the physical world, we will have already trashed out all our issues. We already discovered what our problems, and then we would have already think of the solution or come up with the solution that is agreeable by all the different stakeholders already. And then when we come to this stage, we basically just execute. So this framework requires all the stakeholders to commit to work very closely with each other. Okay, so collaboration is very important to achieve a common set of goals. Okay, through systematical modeling, okay, of what is to be built. Then you rehearse what is to be built. Okay, and then building what has been modeled and rehearsed. Okay, and constantly measuring and narrowing the deviations between the real and the virtual. Okay, so that is really the core idea behind VDC. You want to build two times. Okay, first time in the virtual world, because in the virtual world, okay, less resources, less effort, less energy is used to resolve the issues, resolve the problems. And once you already obtain your solution, okay, to these issues or your problems are resolved, then when you are building for real, you find that it is more smooth, more streamlined, more seamless, and you typically will encounter less problem. Okay, so that is really the idea behind VDC.